All right, if you're watching this, you're like me, and you were too cheap to go spend 400, 500, up to $1,000 to purchase a press and a drawboard system. So I'm going to do the best that I can, go as detailed as I can on how I built this and what it entailed. This one will be just for the press. I'm going to do another one breaking down the drawboard. So this will be two parts. We'll get into the measurements, how I did everything, what I learned, what I'd have done different, all that good stuff. So let's break down materials, what you'll need real fast. This is not the gospel. You can change this. You can do it however you want. This is how I did it. This is the way that I think it'd be easiest to do it. So you're going to need 2 foot, 2-inch square tubing. Now wall thickness is going to depend on the next piece. So 2 foot of 2-inch square tubing. Then you're going to need either 1.5 inch or 1.75 inch square tubing, whatever slides into the 2-inch and leaves the least amount of wiggle room. You're going to need 5 foot of that smaller square tubing. That's going to be for your slide, for your finger uprights, and then for your legs. So 5 foot of that. Okay, then you're going to need 2 foot of 2-inch flat bar. Again, thickness on this really doesn't matter. This is 3/16. 1/8 inch would be fine. That is going to be used for this piece for your clamp. It's going to be used to weld in on the back side of your square tubing for your nut here, and then for your handle on the other side. And then it's also used for your finger brackets here and here. Okay, you're going to need 3 foot of either 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch square stock. Okay, you're going to need a foot of some cold roll, whatever size you want to use for your fingers. Some guys use 1/2 inch, some use 7/16, whatever you can find for this piece here. Okay, you're going to need 3 foot of all thread in either 5/8 or 3/4. You can use fine thread. I don't see a big change. So 3 foot of all thread with 3 nuts that correspond to that all thread. You're going to put 2 nuts back in here as a jam nut setup, and then 1 in here for your slider. Okay, the last piece of the puzzle is your handle. You can get creative with that. I used a simple bolt and some flat bar, and we'll get into that here in a second. But those are pretty much the material that you see here. There is 2 optional pieces. One is the bearing in the handle, and the other are these sheet metal tabs that keep the fingers upright. There are some other ways that I've messed around with to get that to work. But if you want to buy some like 18 gauge sheet metal, you can do that for this as well. So let's break it down even further, and we'll get into each individual part. So with your 2-inch square tubing, you need 24 inches, okay? That's going to serve as your main body for the vise. Okay, so that brings us to our slide piece. So our main body, then we go to our slide. This is going to be the 1.75 inch, 1.5 inch, whatever you found fits into your 2-inch with minimal play. There's 2 ways of doing this. One, you can do it like I have here, where over here at our outright, I 45'd it. Okay, that's option 1. Option 2 would be to just butt weld it on. Either way, you're looking at 26 inches here. Okay, so you want your slide piece to be 26 inches. What that allows is minimal space with storage. When you suck this slide all the way in, you're only looking at 26 inches of length here versus, up to 4 foot. So we've got our main body cut, we've got our slide cut. For our finger outrights, those are going to be 6 inches on this side, and they're going to be 6 inches on this side. Now, if you run your 45 like I did here, you're going to have to measure, and it's going to be longer than 6 inches on one side. If you butt weld it, 6 inches, 6 inches. Okay, our legs, These are 10 inches. You can play around with those. Those don't have to be 10. That's just what I have here. So we have 24 inches for our main body. We have 26 inches for our slide. We have 6 inches for both of our outrights. And then we have 10 inches for our legs. Okay, then we have 21.5 inches for our 2-inch flat bar. Again, you can play around with this number for wherever you want your legs to sit. You've got your bolt and your handle, and then I've got 6 inches of that flat bar here for the handle to rotate on. Okay, so the way this works is we've got all thread running all the way through. So as I crank this handle, it either moves the slide in or out. Okay? This press will service bows out to 33 inches. After that, you're going to have to modify it a little bit and build it longer if you have a longer axle to axle, like a 38 or a 40. But up to 33 axle to axle, this will work. Okay, so we got our main body. First thing we're going to do is take some 2-inch flat bar and we're going to cap this end. Okay. After we get it capped, you need to decide if you're going to put a bearing in it or if you're just going to use the all thread. If you're going to put a bearing in it, you have to cut a hole big enough in your cap for the bearing to sit. If not, you need to drill a hole big enough for your all thread to fit. Once we get that situated, whether it be a bearing or just the all thread, we're going to take and we're going to run 2 nuts on the all thread right here. And it's going to act, one's going to act like a jam nut to the other. Okay? So our all thread's going to slide through. We're going to have a nut and a jam nut and a washer for a wear plate against our cap. That should leave us a little bit of all thread sticking out this side of our cap. From there, you just need to decide if you want to bolt your handle on or if you want to weld it on like I've done here. Either way would work. For the handle, all it is some flat stock with a bolt through it. And then I actually put a little piece of pipe on here for rotation's sake. So that's this end. So we've got our all thread coming through, we've got 2 jam nuts, a wear plate, our cap, and then it sticks through and attaches to our handle. From there, we're going to build this piece. Now, we're pretty much doing the same thing we did on the back side of the main part of our body to our slide piece. So, we're going to take and weld that same cap onto our 1 3/4 or 1 1/2 piece of square tubing. We're going to drill a hole the same way we did before, except this time we're going to weld a nut on either the front or the back of our tubing here. And what that's going to allow is for us to set on here, and then we can screw it in, and this is going to work itself in and out based on the action of our handle on the other side of the vise. Now we can weld on our 6-inch pieces of 1 3/4 or 1 1/2 tubing to our main body and also our slide. Now, I offset this about 2 inches for my handle as it came around to make sure it didn't hit. Okay, we don't want to put this all the way on the outer edge, and then as this handle comes up and around, we're running into wear issues here. So I ran that about 2 inches in, weld it at a perfect 90, and then we can move to our slide. And for our slide, it's the same thing. Again, you can run it a 45 like I did, or you can butt weld it in place. Okay, now we're ready for our legs and our base. So we have our 10 inches two 10-inch chunks of 1.5 or 1 3/4 square tubing, and then our 21.5-inch section of 2-inch flat bar. And you're just going to weld those on and make sure they're just welded to the main body. Don't weld them on the slide, because then obviously it's not going to slide. Okay, so we have our outrights welded on. Now we're ready for our finger bracket. So all this is that 2-inch flat bar, and it's cut to the width of whatever width the square tubing was. So in my case, this was 1 3/4, so it should be about 1 3/4. Okay, we're going to weld that on. So I came in 2 inches and welded it and made sure that it was square to the face and then also square to the main body. I did that on both sides. So the slide side, same thing, came in 2 inches, made sure it was square. On this side, came in 2 inches, made sure it was square. I didn't drill my hole until I had my fingers built so that I could ensure that the fingers sat flat and sat even. Okay, so now we're ready to build our fingers. And by far, this is the hardest part of this entire build. I went through several different renditions of my fingers before I finally landed on this. The way I did it was I took my square stock and I bent these. So none of these are actually cut. They're all just bent. So I came in 1 inch and I bent it to make the front part, and then I came down 2 inches and I bent it back the other way, and then I came down to the bottom and I came 1.5 inches in and bent that back. So that's how I made these, and then it's just shaping them how you want them shaped. The biggest part is you want them all to be uniform. There is a way to use a grinder and a welder, and I will link that video, but essentially you set your stock up in a vise, you come in with your grinder and you just make cuts and you bend it over, and then you take another cut and you bend it over until you get the shape you're looking for. Okay? Now, there are a couple little optional pieces on here. One being the screw in the back, and all that allows this to do is kind of rotate in and out like that. The other piece is this little chunk of sheet metal on the bottom here, and basically that just allows the finger not to fall forward when it's on the vise. Now, I didn't include the sheet metal in the material list. However, you can use pop cans. If you take pop cans and fold them over a handful of times, cut the tops off, fold them over, you can accomplish the same thing. You would just have to glue those in or screw them on here. But that's your finger. They are by far the hardest part of this build. Then as you can see here, I just plasti dipped the top part of the finger. If you can figure this part out, the rest of it is easy. There are fingers available for purchase on like eBay. You can get a set of fingers cut off a CNC for like right around $100. That is another option. So once we have our fingers built, we're just about done. Now we need to drill our holes for our cold roll. So the way I did it was I took my fingers, okay, I lined them up until everything was perfectly aligned, and I drilled my hole. Then that allowed me to set the fingers down on, run them right up against the plate, mark it, and then I could drill the hole in my plate. Okay, now a little tip that I did. Since I only used one plate, I took my cold roll and I actually took a punch and I punched the cold roll all the way around, and kind of made dimples so that when I slid it into my plate, it locked it in place. After that, you're pretty much there. So you slide your fingers on, just like that. So once we get our fingers installed, this is another one of those optional choices. These little screws, it's a 1/4x20 screw. All I did was drill a hole and tap it. And basically all that allows me to do is kind of suck these fingers down in place when I get them to the width that I want. So depending on what bow you have in the vise, you have the ability to work those fingers wider, narrower, whatever you. So just like that, we have got a bow press. So again, the hardest thing is going to be the fingers. If you can get the fingers, everything figured out to where they're all even, you'll be fine. Nothing about this is hard other than the fingers. So right now I have my Mathews lift in it. I'm going to crank it down just a little bit and show you. So string's tight, I'm cranking, and what'll wind up happening is just like that. My string's loose, my cables are loose. I can work on this bow however I need to. And then same thing going the other way. And then same thing going the other way. I can unwind it until everything gets tight. And then I can pull it out of the press. Just like that. And yes, it will work with bows that don't have the limb pockets for the press. So here I have my wife's PSE in here. Same thing. I can crank it down until string's loose, cables are loose, and I can now work on this bow. Okay, so that is the completed press. Like I said, nothing about it is hard. The fingers are going to be the hardest part. If you can get those figured out, the rest of it's relatively easy. You should be able to build this this press for less than $100, like significantly less than $100. If you do decide to buy the fingers, you know, that's going to be your biggest charge. So with that, I'm going to go into how to make the actual draw board in the next video.